It's the early hours of July 17th, 2024, and members of the Lucky Dip gang were joyriding through the streets of Dublin in a stolen car. It was a Hyundai Kona, taken just hours earlier in a burglary nearby. Behind the wheel was a teenage member of the gang, already well known to authorities. Not far away, 40-year-old Michael Farrelly was walking home along the coast road in Baldoyle, a quiet seaside suburb in North Dublin. He had no idea the stolen car was approaching at speed. Seconds later, the vehicle ploughed into him, and without slowing down, leaving Michael dying at the roadside. The Lucky Dip gang emerged from Dublin's western suburbs around 2021. Many of the members were teenagers from working-class parts of the city, especially areas like Blanchardstown in West Dublin. Their unusual nickname, Lucky Dip, came from their random targeting strategy. They would pick places to hit almost at random, like drawing a prize from a lucky dip bag. According to Garda intelligence, gang members would open the Google Maps app on a phone and blindly choose a housing estate or town, often in the Greater Dublin or Leinster area, as that night's target. Reports suggest the youths gave themselves the name, not the media. Through late 2021, the Lucky Dip gang's activities quietly picked up steam. Reports of unusual burglary sprees and stolen car joyrides began to pop up across the Dublin region. The crew would target one area per night and hit as many vehicles and homes as possible in a short window. The youths showed surprising efficiency. CCTV footage showed they could go in and out of a place in 90 seconds, as fast as some professional burglary gangs, albeit targeting far lower-hanging fruit. Their loot in these early crimes was typically small: cash and electronics from unlocked glove compartments, maybe the odd power tool from a garden shed. One 2022 police report estimated the gang had already stolen dozens of cars in the last year, which they mainly use for joyriding rather than resale. During this phase, the core membership of the gang remained small, but it did not take long for others to be drawn into the excitement. A 17-year-old from Tallaght, for instance, became known to authorities as one prolific car thief in the crew. A 15-year-old from another part of Dublin joined and quickly racked up a tally of thefts. By mid-2022, Gardaí estimated 7 to 8 individuals were regularly involved in the Lucky Dip gang's criminal activities. It was around this time that authorities began to realize these were not isolated joyriders, but part of a larger pattern. The nickname Lucky Dip started appearing in police briefings as detectives connected the dots between incidents scattered around Leinster. As 2022 went on, the Lucky Dip gang's activities accelerated and escalated. Their membership grew rapidly from about 7 or 8 youths in mid-2022 to nearly 40 identified members less than a year later. With greater numbers, the gang could hit more places or operate in multiple subgroups. New recruits, typically still in their mid-teens, were eager to prove themselves. While it's never been confirmed that the Lucky Dip gang were behind the Cherry Orchard incident in the summer of 2022, it's a clear example of the kind of chaos groups like them were causing across Dublin at the time, and it happened in an area where members of the gang are known to live. In the last week of July 2022, residents in the estate endured 5 nights of mayhem: stolen cars tearing through the streets, burnt-out vehicles left smouldering on the road, and an atmosphere of lawlessness after dark. Gardaí launched a crackdown, searching homes linked to known young offenders in the area. Several teenagers were arrested in connection with car thefts and disorder. But the situation only got worse.
Jacker! Got it! They're not stopping. Go on! Take on, boy!
On September 19th, a large group of teenagers and bystanders gathered along a street in Cherry Orchard. As night fell, 2 stolen cars began speeding back and forth in front of the crowd. When a Garda patrol car arrived, instead of fleeing, the joyriders drove straight into the Garda vehicle, twice, before ditching the cars and running off. The suspects, some of whom were reportedly already under court-imposed curfews, vanished before backup arrived. Sources at the time suggested the ramming may have been an act of revenge for the recent Garda raids in the area, and although the Lucky Dip Gang were never officially named as those responsible, the tactics and attitude were the same kind of behavior that would soon be seen again and again.
Oh, there's actually trade. There's one in the field. I didn't come.
Oh my God.
Through late 2022 and into 2023, they expanded their range and tactics. No longer content with stealing from cars, they began breaking into houses and businesses more frequently for additional loot. Initially, their targets were small: local shops, takeaways, pubs or cafes that might have a cash till. In one spree in early 2023, for example, a convoy of Lucky Dip burglars hit at least 6 commercial premises in a single night across rural parts of Meath. They smashed their way into hair salons, barber shops, chip shops, and cafes. The yields were tiny, with around €150 at most stolen from each business on average. The gang also leveraged social media. They would live stream high-speed joyrides on TikTok, post videos of themselves tearing out ignition systems or speeding down motorways. This public flaunting of their crimes created a feedback loop. It attracted more attention, which in turn lured more impressionable teenagers into trying to join the gang. By mid-2023, authorities estimated the Lucky Dip Gang's membership had exploded to as many as 60 youth spread across Dublin. No longer a single tight-knit group, but a loose network of joyriders and thieves operating under the same banner. Though still largely disorganized in a traditional sense, the gang developed informal cells or alliances across the city. By late 2023, the authorities had to acknowledge that, chaotic as it was, the Lucky Dip crew met the definition of an organized crime group due to its persistence and networked structure. Perhaps most worrying, there were signs that some in the gang were now willing to use violence to further their aims. In mid-2023, officers intercepted a carload of young Lucky Dip suspects after a chase and found a sledgehammer, an axe, and other weapons inside. Around the same time, a 17-year-old member was identified as a suspect in a recent armed robbery, a marked departure from the gang's previous non-violent property crimes. Behind the scenes, Gardaí ramped up intelligence efforts. They monitored the gang's social media and identified roughly 60 individuals involved across Dublin and shared information across district stations. A particularly thorny issue for authorities was how to physically pursue the gang during their escape. The Lucky Dip Gang's go-to move was fleeing at high speed in stolen cars, a scenario every police force handles with caution. In Ireland, a policy limiting high-speed chases has been in place due to past tragedies, where pursuits led to crashes. This policy effectively means that if a fleeing driver poses too great a risk to the public, officers are instructed to stand down and not chase aggressively. The Lucky Dip Gang was keenly aware of this. They would drive recklessly, knowing that Garda cars likely wouldn't engage in a dangerous chase through crowded streets. In the early hours of July 17, 2024, a stolen car driven by a suspected Lucky Dip Gang member struck and killed Michael Farrelly, an innocent man walking home in the North Dublin suburb of Baldoyle. The car, a Hyundai Kona, stolen from a house earlier that night, had been spotted by authorities driving erratically shortly before the tragedy. Officers had attempted to stop it, but the car fled. Minutes later, that same car fatally hit Michael. The driver and passengers abandoned the vehicle and fled the scene, leaving the victim dying on the roadside. Over the following weeks, authorities gathered evidence from the recovered car, including DNA and forensic traces. By September 2024, they had built enough evidence to arrest 2 prime suspects: an 18-year-old from Blanchardstown, believed to have been the driver, and a 17-year-old from Ballyfermet, thought to be his accomplice in the car. Both were well-known members of the Lucky Dip gang. After questioning, the 17-year-old was released, pending referral to the youth diversion program, while a file on the 18-year-old was sent to the Director of Public Prosecutions for potential serious charges. But even after a man was killed, the gang's sense of arrogance didn't fade. In April 2025, almost 9 months after Michael Farrelly was run down and left to die on the side of the road, residents of the Croftwood area woke to find large graffiti scrawled on a wall of an abandoned house. Graffiti that was directly aimed at 2 local Garda officers by name. The messages were laced with insults, sneering that the police couldn't keep up with the joyriders in chases.